GERENetwork.com.
The following is a presentation of the GERE Radio Network. You're listening to the Better Live Than Dead podcast on the GERE Radio Network.
And with that, we welcome you to the Better Live Than Dead podcast, episode number 174.
174, people.
As you hear there, I am joined on the IndyCar Media Hotline by John Cimino at IMJCMoney. I am Ryan Wolfe at Wolfe BLTD. And before we get too far ahead of ourselves, this podcast, Better Live Than Dead, powered by BetterLiveThanDead.com and the GERE Radio Network. You can hear us on the aforementioned BetterLiveThanDead.com, GereNetwork.com, Apple Podcasts, Bullhorn, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, Pandora, the Radio.com app, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. John, how you doing today?
I would be lying if I said, Ryan, that I am doing well. I think we all collectively, if we have more than half a chromosome in us, are reeling from the effects of the world the past week. And Absolutely. I'm not trying to make this about that, because obviously we're here to offer an escape to that. But in the same, we can't not talk about the elephant.
Yeah, we would definitely be remiss if we didn't take some time on the podcast today to kind of talk about what's been going on, not even in the world, in America, in the country itself. An African-American was brutally murdered. And I don't care if you think that's too harsh, because last time I checked, putting your knee on somebody's throat for 9 minutes and killing them, I can't think of anything else than that being considered brutally murdered. And as people normally do, because no other way seems to work, they took to the streets. Taking to the streets led to protesting, which then led to rioting, which then led to things like looting. Now, my personal opinion here, and I'm trying to gather my thoughts as we go here, I think that people have the right to protest. People have the right to have their voices be heard. The only problem is, because the current president of the United States himself is all but a white supremacist, let's just call it how I see it, that is empowering the wrong group of people to think that they can get away with whatever they want, because if their president believes what they believe, then they're perfectly fine. So these people rightfully took to the streets in multiple cities across the country, and God bless all those people for doing that. And they wanted their voices to be heard. Now, some aforementioned white supremacists have come out and kind of escalated the situations, because that, and we saw in Rochester on Saturday night, John, the rioting and the looting didn't begin until, and we have the photographs, receipts for proof here, until some very overeager white people started smashing cars and flipping them over. Mm-hmm. So again, for me, I don't know if difficult is the right word, but I feel like my voice is not as important as someone else's, strictly because I am a white male. And when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, white people don't have it hard at all. And white males, or white men, I should say, probably have it easier than anybody on the face of this earth, because for some reason, that's what the people in power think is right. And it's not fair, and it needs to change. And my message across the board, John, and I'll give you the floor on this one, is that it's time for a change. Wholeheartedly, 100%, top to bottom, there needs to be a change, and it needs to happen yesterday.
I don't like to play the I'm not white, I'm a minority card. I try my best to steer myself away from that and the stereotype that comes with it. And I know my name is John Cimino, and I know that's an Italian name, but I grew up in a very Hispanic household. That my mother's side of the family is all Hispanic. My grandmother came here from Puerto Rico. Her parents originate from, I want to say Puerto Rico, but I think the lineage, when you go back far enough, comes from Spain. But I don't like to play that card, and I don't like to make mention of it because I don't want people to think that I am using it specifically to gain any sort of sympathy or try to, bring my personal self up to the level of which the attention is focused on, so I don't play that game. It's hard for somebody like Lewis, whose last name is Perez. It's obviously very Spanish. His name is a giveaway. So it's harder for him to kind of not take that stance because the watchful eye and the assumption is already going to be there, I feel. Does that make any sense? Like,
yes,
somebody
absolutely.
sees the name Lewis Perez and be like, oh, great, he's going to play the Spanish card. You know what I mean? And fortunately for me, because of my name, I don't have that benefit. But that's where it ends because of the skin, because I do have, I am brown skin. I do understand Spanish. I do relate culturally to a group of people that are not deemed, quite frankly, by today's Trumpublicans as American, as worthy of being here or having a voice or anything like that. And it's infuriating. And as somebody who is, cultured in America, in Americana, who sounds very, my lineage is my lineage. If you know me, you know me. My Italian side shows more, but growing up in that Hispanic atmosphere, growing up with other minorities, being one of the charter members in middle school of an after-school group that was specifically dedicated to African Americans and Hispanics. We called it the Collage of Cultures, and it was myself and it was several African American students that were a part of this group. I grew up very ethnic. I grew up very, quite frankly, very black. I grew up in that element. So when I say that I relate to them, everybody in this situation, I can relate because I was around to see in my younger days people look down on black and brown people as insignificant because of who they were. This irritates the living fuck out of me. And I told you before, Ryan, I'm going to get very animated, and I couldn't guarantee that this was going to be PC. And again, at IamJCMoney on Twitter, direct all of the hate to me because I will fuck your shit up if you come at me with some nonsense with this. I'm speaking from the heart. I am speaking as a minority. I am tired of seeing this. I am tired of seeing this. I am tired of people I know, people I love, going through this kind of insanity, and I'm fortunate. I am fortunate to where, Ryan, nobody that I know personally has lost a life. But I cannot speak that for everybody. George Floyd's family, they unfortunately have the unfortunate responsibility of moving on, knowing that a family member of theirs, and whatever came out on George Floyd in terms of the reasoning that the police was called and all that stuff, that is not the story. Because if it's forgery, whatever, that's not the story. The story is what happened and why he lost his life. And he unjustifiably lost his life. Though that family, people that know him, now have to deal with what I've dealt with in terms of, being looked at negatively because of my ethnicity or my skin color or anything like that. They have to do that, but they also have the added caveat now of having a family member lost because of it. And it sucks. And every American, every person in this world should be pissed off, and they should be ready to protest. Now, I'm not taking the side of the rioters either, because the rioters, which, as you've affectionately pointed out and appropriately pointed out earlier on, especially in Rochester with the photographs that have come out and everything, they were not Black Lives Matters members. They were not a member of the committee that organized the peaceful protest. And the protest itself was very peaceful. These were a bunch of entitled assholes, or MAGAers, as the president would call them, that decided to take advantage of another demographic's anger, justifiable anger, to cause chaos and make that very demographic that was peacefully protesting look like the outliers for it, turning the attention away from what the peaceful protest was about. And now all they're talking about is the looting, and they're talking about the riots, and they're talking about this, and they're talking about that. I
think the worst part about it, to jump in really quick, is that in most of the cities in which there was rioting and looting, it's the cause that we've seen from people on the scene, from reputable sources on the scene on Twitter. Because right now, if you go on Facebook, it feels like it's a Trump paradise.
I had to deactivate my Facebook for a bit, and I'll explain why. It's funny you mention it that way, because that's one of the main reasons why. It's so
rough, but a lot of these protests, I mean, granted, there's always there are certain protests that are created just to specifically cause damage, cause harm, whatever it may be. But for the most part, what I've personally seen on Twitter, a lot of these protests were very peaceful, and then the cops show up and start shooting. You've got people getting shot in the face with rubber bullets, people getting shot in the face with tear gas canisters. There's a video out of Minneapolis where a lady was standing on her porch. The cops walk by and turn and just start firing on her. I mean, this is the problem. We're learning quickly that if white people walk into a state capitol with AR-15s, that's okay. But yes, if anybody else, and I'm not even going to say any specific ethnicities or any specific races, literally anybody that's not white does anything of substance, mm-hmm, they immediately start firing on them or arresting them or assaulting them. And I can't begin to tell you how many videos and pictures I've seen from social media of people who got, there's one lady who I believe was in Texas, got shot in the forehead with a rubber bullet. There was another kid, I believe in Minneapolis, it was Indiana, if I remember correctly. It was Fort Wayne, Indiana. He got shot in the face with, I believe it was either a rubber bullet or a tear gas canister, and lost his eye. And there's another one where a lady was shot with a rubber bullet when she was sitting on the ground. The cop kicked her in the face and knocked her over. It's like, what is the common denominator here? It's not the protesters. It's the people that are pushing this to a boiling point. And it needs to change. It absolutely needs to. And the thing is too, is that you have the federal government who today comes out and says that they're going to label Antifa or anti-fascists as a terrorist organization. But why aren't we doing that about any sort of white supremacy, which is a lot of the problem that we have in America? Well, ever since Donald Trump became president, white supremacy has come to the forefront.
Right. You hit the nail on the head here. And again, give me all the heat. Anybody that's listening here, if you're still listening to this portion of the podcast, give me all the heat, because the Donald Trump presidency has enabled the less intelligent of the world. And I'm talking about the stereotypical uneducated voter, uneducated person. He has allowed, quite frankly, these stupid people to feel smart. And because he talks like them. And he's forced to, and he's in a position where he the position itself, the title of the president of the United States, probably not from 2020 until 2024 at this point, depending on whether or not we're gifted another Trump term, but it became okay. He became their voice. It became acceptable for Americans, true Americans, not the Native Americans, but true Americans, the guys that will go to freaking tailgating events wearing American flag jackets, drinking Bud Light or Budweiser, talking about, I'm American, man, I'm free. Freedom ain't free, or whatever bullshit that they cling on to, he has enabled that. He has enabled that behavior and their unbridled passion for being recognized. It's when you talk ill of Donald Trump to a Donald Trump supporter, you're talking ill of the man that they love, and they will defend him fiercely. But the problem is when the man that they love is unqualified to handle not only the position from the businesses in which he owned as a private citizen, but the office of the presidency of the United States. He has not stepped up and said a word to date. As of this recording, he hasn't said a word about any of the riots or any of that type of stuff. He's done nothing. There's a protest that's being marched from some university right to the front of the White House. So he's going to have to address it at some point. But the fact is we have not had ample, competent leadership, and since he took office, we have not had it. It has not been there. It's not being displayed now. And quite frankly, Ryan, I have done the best that I could do to try and be peaceful about my friends and family or acquaintances that for some ungodly reason get behind this asshole and will defend him. People that I'm supposed to love, support, and whatever. Then they get behind Trump and his shitty policies and his stupid behavior and his, he's just joking. Like, he's not joking. Damn well he's not joking when he says, nice people. There are nice people on both sides. Nazi protesters and people against it. There's good people on both sides. Fuck you. No, there's not.
I mean,
for those, and I'm just going to leave it at this because now I'm starting to really get irritated, and maybe we should take if we want to extend this conversation, this part of the conversation, we'll take it to the JC Money Show and put it on Patreon or something.
Sure.
But it makes my blood boil. And
here's the thing too.
I have no patience anymore for anybody that can justify this guy being in office. I have no patience for it anymore, and I've been very aggressive online and in private of late to those people that would otherwise be friends and family of mine. I can't tell you how many people I've told to fuck off because of it.
My last thing here, and then we can move over to some other less important things, is that the president has proven time and time again he is completely incompetent when it comes to anything. But when situations such as George Floyd being murdered in Minneapolis, you try to give and I don't at all, but I'm just speaking in a broad sense here. Every time something happens, the president gets a chance to a reprieve to essentially help begin to turn the tide, right? And his response was, when the looting begins, the shooting begins. Me,
and he didn't know. He quote unquote didn't know that it derived from a racist and racist comments, which either is a total lie or completely validates the claim that this motherfucker has no business being anywhere near the White House, let alone a microphone. But I just think you're a president of America. You got it. He got voted in. Fuck you, and fuck anybody that buys into that shit. I'm sorry.
At the end of the day, he it all starts at the top. The behavior is disgusting from the top down. The American people will have to continue to rise up and do whatever it takes to make sure that that change happens. Honestly,
those that do not learn from history are doomed to repeating it. Clearly, the assholes and the higher ups skipped history class or were too high in the 1960s to realize that we are reliving it now. I never in my wildest dreams, Ryan, when I was bored out of my mind in social studies class in the 1990s, reading about this, reading about things like this, reading about protests that were happening, reading about, separate seats on the bus or separate bathrooms, a colored drinking fountain, couldn't drink out of the same drinking fountain or things like that, reading about shit like that in the 1990s. And I'm like, damn, that's kind of messed up. Like, I'm glad I'll never have to see anything like that. Well, we are legitimately separate drinking fountains away from being there. And I never thought I would see it. And as a parent of young children, one of whom is old enough to understand that life really isn't like princesses and, talking stuffed animals and going on adventures and everybody's friends, and it makes me sad because there's a degree of innocence that is now being taken away because the reality of a bunch of imbeciles that for some reason or another continue to hold higher power. I don't understand it. I'm ready to have these conversations with my daughter, but I don't want to. And it's a very, 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 very sad thing to say. And I hope to God that my daughters never hear this. Even when they're older and they go back and listen to dad ramble about sports and politics, from the Trump administration, and the archives. I hope they never hear this, but I am saddened to say this, but relieved in a way that their skin pigmentation thankfully more resembles their mother's and not mine. So I don't think that I hope that they don't have to ever be worried. But I pose this challenge to anybody that's listening to this and are ready to fire up. And they may be white, they may be Caucasian, and may not have their privilege in check, and are ready to fire up an angry tweet at me, because I'm sure I'll get a few of them. I ask you this before you do this: would you voluntarily switch places with an African American today, in today's society, just in life? Would you switch places with them? If you voluntarily said yes, I'm proud of you. I guarantee you none of you would. I guarantee it. Not a single person would not a single one of those true patriots would volunteer to switch places with a black or brown or an Asian American at all. And that, my friends, is what privilege is.
I think that's as a good of a spot as we can move on than any, honestly. Quick update,
Ryan. I told you it wasn't.
No, you're good. You're okay. You are absolutely okay. That's exact. I wanted to have an actual conversation and not some bullet point. This is what happened. Let's move on. No, we actually, a good talk, and I appreciate that.
No, it is important to get out there.
Absolutely. You mentioned Lewis during during our conversation there. Lewis is still on the mend. Hopefully we'll get him back on the podcast here soon. I feel bad because I didn't reach out to him about the podcast today. But then again, I didn't even know if we were going to podcast today because I didn't really feel like doing much this morning. But as the day has gone on, wanted to podcast, wanted to talk to John. So here we are. I'll run through a quick story here and then I'll let John tell his story that he told me that he has to get out in the podcast, which I'm very excited to hear about.
I don't know how exciting it is now after what we just talked about, but I will try my best to articulate it in a much more podcast friendly way.
For me, long story short, I had a nice little COVID scare recently, which was ended up being a week of being locked in my house, which it's, I'm not trying to sound insensitive, but it is very difficult to do that. Thankfully I was able to go outside and spend some time in my backyard, which that worked out. But my wife got a call from her boss saying that there was a low risk exposure, and that I should not go to work. My wife still had to go to work, which that's a different ball of wax, which we can talk about at a different time. But I was told to stay away from pretty much anybody except for my wife for a week, because it had already been a week since the exposure. So they said, well, at least to play it safe, stay at home for a week, which thankfully now I don't seem to have. I never had any symptoms or anything like that, but I'm very thankful that they were at least able to call us and give us a heads up so we're aware. But also, real quick, I had a tree guy over, and during that 7-day quarantine that I had, and he almost cut his finger. Well, he cut his finger pretty bad. I wouldn't say almost cut it off. He cut his finger pretty bad. And my wonderful wife, as I mentioned before, a family nurse practitioner, had to go out and play doctor as he was bleeding all over my side yard. So that was great as well. That pumped some excitement into my life. But John, I'm looking forward to hearing your story, and then we can jump into some sports talk.
I mean, this story is definitely not that. So it's more, okay. So anybody that has followed me for a long period of time, or anybody that knows me directly, knows that there are very, very few things in life that I truly, truly hate. One of them we obviously touched upon earlier on. The other is Walmart. I hate Walmart. I hate Walmart with a passion. If I never step foot inside another Walmart again, that will be too soon. That is how much I hate Walmart. Now, notwithstanding, I do shop there, in terms of like having delivery, because they compete with Amazon there with delivery. And up until COVID began, they had Walmart grocery pickup, which was just probably one of the greatest things ever, because you could grocery shop at Walmart, get the good Walmart prices for the food, and never have to step foot in the store. You just drive to a parking spot, you park, you pop it in the app that you're there, and then they bring it out, fill up your trunk, and you go on your way. It was the greatest thing ever. I cringe every time I have to step into Walmart, though, because just of what you could what you could encounter in there. And let me tell you, when you go into places like Wegmans or Walgreens or Tops or wherever that's a Home Depot, Lowe's, they have tape on the ground to designate 6 feet apart, stand here until called on to put your food on the thing or whatever, They're very, very good with the social distancing there and the enforcement of it, particularly with wearing the masks over the face like you're supposed to do in public anyways, for now. And so you go there. Walmart, you can tell they tried, because they've got like the tape, and they've got the section where you go in one door and out this other one, all in kind of like one line there. And they have the markings on the ground to create, or at least tell people, this is how far apart you need to be, so figure your shit out. And it completely does not happen at all. It is seriously like the self-checkout line was a swampy sausage fest of people just on top of one another. Some with masks, some without masks. And people just have I don't know what it is about Walmart, but I've gone into Walmart twice in the past 2 weeks for pool supplies and things like that. And each time people are on top of one another as if nothing ever happened. It's like looking at Florida, except in a Walmart. Like it's like nothing ever happened. People are not social distance one another, whatever. So I'm the type of shopper that, I go in, get what I need to get, I come out. And I've got one of these face shields that cover my face, and it's all in black, not like that stupid American flag face shield that true Americans are wearing nowadays. So I go, I put my mask on, I go in, I get my things, I stand farther away from the last person in line, And, I'm following those rules, right? Now, mind you, I have this mask on my face. So all you see is my hair, my forehead, and my eyes. You don't see what I look like from my eyes down.
I can see where this is going.
so it's hard to, really get the point across of the look. You know what I mean? Like if somebody's too close to you, you can kind of shoot a quick glare or whatever, and like they would know, oh shit, okay, let me back off or whatever. Like it's hard to say. You don't know if the person's smiling. You don't know whatever. So people tend to play dumb. So I kind of channeled in my wrestling, and I remembered something that Kane, WWE superstar Kane, once said when he was wearing the mask in the beginning, and he was like, the problem with the character that I had at first was nobody could tell my facial expressions or any if I could make any expressions at all because my face was covered. He goes, so what I did was, I was playing with my dog one day and I blew the dog whistle to get his attention, and my dog sort of tilted his head and kind of gave this puzzled look on his face, but kind of gave he tilted the head. And Kane himself was like, that's a great idea. I'm going to try that. My face is covered, but if I tilt the head a little bit, people will think, oh shit, he heard something, and sure enough, he did. And I said, well, this would be a great thing to try with my freaking face shield on in public, right? Okay. Of all places to try it, Walmart is the best place to try it because you're gonna encounter something there. So I get to the front. I get to the front of the line, and I put up my bags of shock and chlorine and all that. And the cashier starts to ring everything, and she's talking to me or whatever. And all of a sudden, this freaking guy walks up like he's a freaking barrel assing right up to the freaking line, and completely ignores the sign that says, please wait here or whatever. And the guy comes up and he gets directly, he's got 2 items in his thing. I'm still loading items onto the conveyor belt. And he comes up and he stands right next to me. He's not wearing a mask at all. And he stands right next to me. And I turn around and I look at him, and he just sat there and looked at me. And then I pulled the cane and tilted my head a little bit and squinted my eyes. And I didn't say anything, but I did that. And this guy gets this look on his face, and he starts backing up, and then he backs into somebody else. So now these two are starting to, what's the matter with you? What's the matter with you? The guy that got too close did not speak a lick of English. So, and he's talking in Spanish. So he starts yelling at the one guy in Spanish. The other guy is telling him, I don't understand what you're saying, and yelling at him in English. And I'm sitting here with a mask on my face, my head tilted I think I just started this. Until I turn around and, your total's 30-something, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I paid for it. And I looked back at the two that are arguing, and I looked back at the cashier, and I was like, sorry about that. And she was like, oh, he shouldn't have been near you anyways. And I was like, yeah, that's a good point, but still, I said, do you want me to step in and break it up or anything? And she's like, no, I'll if it starts getting crazy, I'll call the manager over. I was like, okay, cool. But,
if you're not going to wear a mask, at least respect social distancing.
Right. And so as I go to pick up my bag, the cashier looks at me and goes, have a good day, papi. And I look at her and I'm like, and I tilt my head. I do the cane head tilt.
John, she wanted some of that smoke, man.
And I'm like, thinking to myself, like, I'm wearing you don't even know what I look like. I could take my mask off and look like Kane described himself to be burned, mangled mess. You know what I mean? Like,
Walmart cashier lady wanted that smoke.
She was ready to risk it all. And I'm like, nope. And I took off, and I was like, I'm done with Walmart. And then I think
I'm not going back to Walmart.
Not too long after that is when you had texted me about the podcast, and I had said, yeah, I just left Walmart. I got to throw this on there.
That's a good one. Walmart. I don't want to go back to Walmart. I'm good with never going there.
I'll never go. I'll order online from the app, and if and when we get back to a degree of normalcy, and so too does Walmart grocery pickup, I will do that.
Walmart is low key like a human cesspool.
Well, no, I will never. No. F that place.
Moving on to what to talk about. There's actually a really good thing we got to mention before we talk about the return of professional sports in America. Recently on the PFTOT podcast, Chris Sims says the Cleveland Browns and Seattle Seahawks discussed a trade back in 2018 that would have sent quarterback Russell Wilson to the Browns for the first overall pick. I should have warned everybody we're moving back to sports. So sorry to disappoint you and bore the crap out of you with sports talk, because that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So anyways, 2018 first overall pick would have been sent to Seattle for Russell Wilson. That was just kind of the framework of the deal. Obviously, there would have been more. Pro Football Talks' Mike Florio went on to confirm the conversation did happen, but his source stated, quote, it was more of a conceptual conversation. Wilson did sign a 4-year, $140 million contract extension in April of 2019, which did indeed include a full no-trade clause. Mike Florio did mention that his sources told him that Wilson will likely be dealt out of Seattle before the end of the deal. They also mentioned, too, that no trade clause was included because of those conversations. Now, John, before we break this down real quick, I do want to mention, because Florio mentioned he does believe he'll get dealt before the end of his contract is up. Right now in 2020, if dealt, Russell Wilson will deal a $70 million dead cap hit to the Seahawks, so not this year. $39 million in 2021, so not next year. $26 million in 2022, his age 33 season, probably not happening that year either. But there is a potential out in the contract for Seattle after 2022, which includes a $13 million dead cap hit. So his So after that season, heading into his age 34 season, it's likely that we'll see potentially the end of Russell Wilson in Seattle. Now, Russell Wilson, since entering the league in 2012, among quarterbacks who have started at least 100 games, 100 NFL games, that's 12 quarterbacks, including Wilson, he's tied for first among qualifying quarterbacks with Phillip Rivers. He started 128 of 128 games. He's second among qualifying quarterbacks in wins with 86. Tom Brady has 95. Russell Wilson's record, 86, 41-1. He has the 7th most passing yards among 12 quarterbacks, 29,734. 5th most passing touchdowns with 27. The 10th, he qualifies 10th out of 12 qualifying quarterbacks with 68 interceptions, 68. So he would technically be then third best in that category. Second among quarterbacks in the league in rushing yards with 3,993, 19 rushing touchdowns, third among quarterbacks in the league behind Cam Newton and Andy Dalton. And he has 2 Super Bowl starts, which is second among quarterbacks. Brady has 4. Now, technically, Jimmy Garoppolo has 3 Super Bowl appearances, but only 1 start. That was with San Francisco last year. Now, John, how asinine would it have been if the Seattle Seahawks traded Russell Wilson to the Cleveland Browns because it appears they didn't want to pay him what he was worth?
It would have been incredibly asinine if Seattle did that, all things considering. You know damn well, you being a Bills fan, me being a Jets fan, exactly how hard it is to get a franchise quarterback, a quarterback that is good, that is a difference maker. Russell Wilson very much is that difference maker. Now, and let's not forget, Russell Wilson wasn't the first choice for the Seattle Seahawks. Matt Flynn was. Matt Flynn was the one that Seattle paid the big contract to come over there from Green Bay to be the starter, only to be beaten out by Russell Wilson, who I believe was drafted in the 3rd round that year that he was drafted. Big Russ outplayed him, and it was off to the races. And he clearly has proven he is one of the top NFL quarterbacks in the game. All the stats that you listed there, that's one thing. But to trade him would have been extremely careless and risky, and you had to have an idea or had to truly believe that Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold or Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen were any better than Russell Wilson. And at this time, the only one that I think comes close out of those four that could be like, okay, maybe he could be, with Pete Carroll's guidance, better than Russell Wilson, might have been Lamar Jackson, especially for that offense.
So I think for me, honestly,
unless they knew. Well, hold on a second. Unless they knew that they were going to go after and get someone like Lamar Jackson, who I think would fit Seattle's offense, their current Pete Carroll-led offense. I don't see how Josh Allen, Sam Darnold, or Baker Mayfield would have fit in. So the trade to me would not have made sense at all.
So before I rudely tried to cut you off, sorry.
Yeah, you bastard.
Because I have a question that pertains to that. My question for you, because obviously we don't have a whole lot of knowledge on the situation. It's more of just oh, hey, by the way, did you ever hear this story type of deal? My question for you would be, do you think this is more of a Seattle, I guess, led thing where they said, well, maybe we can get the first overall pick. There are some guys that we like in the draft that we could replace Russell Wilson with. Or do you think this is Cleveland going, yeah, we want to get Russell Wilson? Because my thought is that we've seen how Seattle runs their offense. And even though they have arguably, if Russell Wilson continues on the pace that he continues to run at, or to play quarterback at, I should say, my thought is that he likely is a future Hall of Famer, just based off of what the I guess the resume, that's the word I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. The resume he currently has, he's headed in that direction. Mm-hmm. But they have not shown any sort of eagerness to make him even the center of his own team, which blows my mind because he's a fantastic quarterback. So I wonder if it weren't a situation where the conversation happened strictly because they're like, well, look, if we're going to pay him, we might as well at least see what he's worth on the open market before we decide to. They call Cleveland. They say, would you give us the first overall for Russell Wilson? I'm sure that Cleveland then probably crapped their pants, and then Seattle, after the conversation, was probably like, yeah, never mind.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
it still blows my mind that even though this allegedly did or didn't happen, which gives us some fodder to talk about, which we appreciate it. Why does Seattle not treat Russell Wilson like he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league? Because he clearly is. I mean,
there too. There is the business side of the NFL. So I mean, it's highly possible that they were just doing their due diligence, like, quite frankly, New England did with Brady and San Fran a few years ago. Obviously, that has now, as we have learned, led to there being an extreme amount of agita between Tom Brady and Belichick and the Patriots, which ultimately led to him leaving after 20 seasons to go to Tampa Bay, which is still very weird to me. But, football is a business. And any business owner that didn't look into possibilities or different scenarios with whomever isn't forward looking. And so maybe that's probably what Seattle was intending, was just to see what the possibility was. And if it was something that was a blowaway offer, I think then there would have been much more serious discussions, and I think it would have leaked back then. But I'm sure. Going to assume that Seattle, if in that scenario that you described, we're just kind of like, yeah, let's see what someone who is quarterback starved might offer.
And I wonder too if this is coming out because of that Wilson might not play. So maybe Mike Florio or Chris Sims, one of their sources said, hey, I don't think Seattle's going to keep Russell Wilson for his entire contract. By the way, they almost traded him, or maybe Chris Sims had heard the story before and sat on it because, I mean, what good is it at that point? But then you go, okay, they almost traded him or thought about trading him, and now I'm hearing they're not going to keep him. So I wonder if it may have been that as well.
I almost subscribe to the theory that that's going to depend on whether or not, on how long Pete Carroll continues to coach for the Seattle Seahawks. I don't think, because mind you, Pete Carroll is 68 years old. He's not a young head coach. So I don't know that he'll necessarily want to, or it's a best idea for him to, unless all he cares about is collecting the check, which could be possible. But to develop a new system with a new younger quarterback when the one you have right now is arguably one of the top 10 in the game, I'd say arguably one of the top 5 in the game, but definitely one of the top 10 in the game right now. Does he want to do that? Does he want to dedicate another season or two, or does he want to win now because he knows he's not going to be coaching at 73, 74,
sure,
whatever? So if Pete Carroll were to leave after the 2020 season or after the 2021 season and retire, then I think the rumblings about Russell Wilson and his happiness and whether or not he continues to play in Seattle or whether or not someone else comes in and wants to bring their own guy and start their own legacy there, I think that's when that would be really brought up to the forefront and questioned.
Yeah, and I think, too, you mentioned Carroll potentially retiring. He signed a contract extension through the 2021 season, so I wonder, if maybe we're getting to that point where he's going to start considering his future. Also, I do want to mention here, Pete Carroll, the 9/11 truther, he turned 69 in September.
Nice.
I had to get that in there because I'm 5 years old.
Very nice. Very nice.
So also to wrap this up with a nice little bow, because it's actually kind of hilarious. Ex-Cleveland Browns head coach at the time, Hugh Jackson, quote, "I've never heard something so crazy in my life," Jackson said on CBS Sports Radio. Quote, "I'm sure if they're having conversations on their own and just driving around doing those kinds of things, I think if something was serious about that, we, the executive team, the organization, would have known." So, John, much like most of his tenure as Browns head coach, Hugh Jackson had no idea what was going on.
I'm going to probably I'm going to file this under the category of I don't know this to be true, but it probably is. I'm going to assume that they had the Seahawks, if they had those conversations with Browns ownership, and Browns ownership said nothing to Hugh Jackson.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that, absolutely, because even when Hugh Jackson was the head coach of the Browns, it didn't seem like he was very connected. It seemed like he was there for one reason and one reason only. That was to lose a lot of football games.
I think the only reason, I think the only person that didn't realize he was 2-32 as a head coach was him.
Yeah, I think so. Good defensive coordinator, very poor head coach. Didn't have the best opportunity to succeed, but still, very poor head coach. Now, moving over to the third of the three big things this week, an update on the return of sports in America. COVID-19 has been, I'm not saying it's been getting better. Hospitalizations have been kind of rebounding since states have opened back up, but it's more or less now I explain it akin to like a baseball player when he comes up. A batter comes up, he's really good. The league adjusts to him. Now he has to readjust to the league. COVID-19 came in, we adjusted to it. Now it's making those adjustments itself, and now we have to get ready for it to come back. So that's kind of what's happening right now, in my opinion, at least. Not so much of an expert opinion, but just what I'm seeing. The National Hockey League announced a 2014 tournament at what they call Hub Cities. Features undecided qualifying and seeding rounds. This will also allow certain teams to play their way into the playoffs, as well as allow teams to determine seeding among each other. The only note I have about this right now is that the Buffalo Sabres, no matter what, their season is over, and they still continue to be absolute booty. So I wrote something about it over at diebytheblade.com regarding how Jack Eichel talked about how he was pissed off from losing. And how
you also posted a Craigslist ad with a team for sale.
Yes, there's a very, very funny Twitterer that whom I'm a mutual follow with, and she was the one who did that, and it was
she was the one that did that.
Yeah, it was absolutely hilarious to wake up to see that, and then it blew up nationally. But you know what?
Well, yeah, because when I got the alert from the CBS Sports app, and it said Buffalo Sabres fan list team for sale on Craigslist, I'm like, the first person I thought of was you. And I'm like, please, God, please tell me Ryan did this. And so I clicked and I read it, and I'm like, kind of looks like Ryan. Please tell me Ryan did this. And that's when I tweeted at you. Did you do this?
I mean, look,
I'm disappointed. I was very disappointed.
I've been known to be creative, but I'm not that creative, man. That's next level right there.
It was hilarious.
We'll talk about the Sabres at a later date, though. Myself and Brayton Wilson over on the Sabercast, another Better Live Than Dead and GERE Network staple. We'll talk about that shortly enough. But the National Football League now, all signs, John, point to a 16-game regular season. Really seems like the National Football League is treating COVID as if it is not real. Dolphins owner Stephen Ross said recently during an interview with CNBC, quote, "I think there will definitely be a football season this year. Real question is, will there be fans in the stadium? Right now today, we are planning to have fans in the stadium." John, do you think this plan is a bad idea?
The plan to have football or the plan to have fans in the stadium?
I guess the kind of twofold, the plan to have a full 16-game season, and then also the plan on top of that to have a stadium full of fans.
I'm not against the season being played. I'm not against that. So long as they are taking the appropriate measures that, say, an All Elite Wrestling or UFC is doing, where they're having on-site testing, in private tents outside of the arena. So I can only speak for All Elite Wrestling because I have a friend that works there.
A humble brag.
Yeah, they I guess on the day that they do shows, because they only do the TV shows, they don't do any live show house tour things or anything like that. They just do TV out in Jacksonville on Wednesday nights, and they have tents set up outside of the venue that when the talent arrives, they got to sit in their car or whatever if it's full and wait, and then they have to actually go. Anybody that's being used gets tested before they go in, and this is all on Tony Khan's dollar. Tony Khan, the Jacksonville Jaguars owner's son. And it's on his dime. And from what I understand from what I've been reading and some of the things that I've been told is the talent will go into this tent. They'll get the test. They'll wait to get the results. If they're in the clear, they'll be allowed in the building. If they're not clear, they're told to go home. They got to go home. And there's not been any issues in AEW, at least, that have been known. So, and my understanding is UFC does the same thing. I would assume that the NBA and the NHL, depending on their hub cities and whatever, that they're going to be set up as well. I know I'm jumping ahead here, but and we'll talk about the NBA and what you have listed there. But the rumors of them possibly being at Disney's complex, which would afford all of the teams there like their own separate hotels and things like that. So that would be, I'm okay if it's done correctly and it's done smartly like that in terms of allowing the teams to play games and games to air on TV. As far as fans in the stadium right now, I don't know how they can do that when most places are still being limited to a 20% capacity. So in the case of Stephen Ross here saying we're planning on having fans in the stadium, he leaves that very open-ended because Hard Rock Stadium can sit 65,000 people, but you're not going to get 60 to 65,000 people there. So 20% of that would be what?
It's a very easy dunking opportunity to say that fans don't show up to Dolphins games anyways.
Well, I mean, maybe not now with Tua being there. A new quarterback brings about new fans until that new quarterback is not good, and then nobody shows up. But
so the one thing I want to mention, John, before I forget here, is that there are some concerns among football players about playing games in empty stadiums. And Atlanta Falcons center Alex Mack, as told by William McFadden, at Will McFadden on Twitter, who himself, he is a reporter for the Atlanta Falcons. Fair enough. He tweeted out, Alex Mack says he'd be worried about opposing teams being able to hear his line calls if players are mic'd up during games with no fans in the stands. So with that being said, the NFL
would have really hated the AAF or the XFL.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. The NFL has talked about potentially piping in stadium noise, which teams like the Falcons will be pissed off because they got in trouble before and I believe draft picks taken away.
Yes.
For piping in noise.
Yeah.
But so there's that option. But also other NFL players have, I think it was Deshaun Jackson said flat out, straight up, mic everybody. Like the what was it? I think. Did the XFL do that too, or was it that was XFL? I believe that had XFL. Literally everybody XFL and everything, and everyone had a microphone on, pretty much.
Yes.
And maybe that's a way. Maybe that's a way to expand
and everything.
Maybe that's a way to expand the brand, expand the game a little, make it a little more interesting. Because, I mean, we saw the NFL already tabled the 4th and 15 instead of an onside kick. Potential rule change and stuff like that. But there are ways for the NFL to be more exciting. And if there are no fans in the stands, understandably, because of COVID-19 concerns, I think there's a really good opportunity for them to kind of expand the game a little, have a little fun with it. But we'll see for sure.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, to answer the original question, I don't think playing the games themselves is a bad idea. But I would say that seating any fans, if you know, or any more than what may be allowed, spread out in a 65,000 seat stadium. Yep. I don't know that that's necessarily the best idea at this moment.
I wholeheartly agree.
You know, who knows what's going to come with this? It seems like at least on the surface, it seems like things are tapering a little bit in terms of COVID, but if you listen to Dr. Anthony Fauci a couple of weeks back, he warned that next winter could see this pop up again. So and to not dismiss what's going on right now and the preventative measures that's happening right now, because if we do that, the human brain tends to forget shit quickly and think, oh, well, everything's normal. And then all of a sudden, boom, you're right back into it, around the same time. So it's going to be really weird. So the 2021 season in general, for no matter what sport, is going to be a very weird one. And it's going to be a lot of trial and error, I think, amongst all of the leagues, because sure. we don't yet fully have a full year of COVID-19 under our belt to truly understand and truly grasp how this thing is going to work. Are any cures available for it? There's none right now, none known right now, and we don't know how it's going to return, and if it's going to return, and does it return in a different form? Does it return worse? It took a couple of years for the flu outbreak of 1918 to get under control. So I'm assuming that, with being much more technologically advanced in 2020 than we were in 1918, it may not take that long, but I would say at the very least a year and a half, maybe, to get a good idea of where we could be. I would fancy more fans being allowed in the stadiums in the 2021 season.
Yeah, I think just avoiding the potential of getting people sick. Just it's fine. It's fine. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've seen NASCAR, which I know that their fan base has kind of dwindled as the years have gone on, but NASCAR is racing empty racetracks, essential personnel only. We've seen UFC do it, WWE and AEW, like you mentioned, John, stuff mm-hmm. like that. So it can be done. Is it awkward? Is it uncomfortable? Sure. But also getting COVID-19 and potentially dying, I would presume, is awkward and uncomfortable as well.
Right.
On that bright note, the NBA, in my personal opinion, John, they have the best plan out yet. They have a reported 16-team tournament. It's likely set for Disney's Wide World of Sports complex in Orlando. A 16-team tournament based on reseeding, based on record, regardless of conference. That's the big one right there.
I love that idea.
That's going to make this even that much better. And I'm going to tell you why in just a second. But here are the potential matchups, John. You've got number one, the Bucks versus the 16 Magic. I'm just going to say the team names, not the cities and all that, obviously. But the first seed Bucks against the 16 seed Magic, the 9 seed Thunder against the 8 seed Heat, the 5 seed Celtics against the 12 seed 76ers, the 13 seed Mavericks against the 4 seed Clippers, the 3 seed Raptors versus the 14 seed Grizzlies, the 11 seed Pacers versus the 6 seed Nuggets, 7th seed Jazz against the 10th seed Rockets, and the 15 seed Nets against the 2 seed Lakers. John, the one reason I'm excited about this is because everybody who has predicted, almost everyone that I've read, who has predicted how this will end up playing out, is there is a very, very, very strong chance that we get a Clippers-Lakers final.
Oh, I would be all in on that.
And a lot of people during the regular season, I mean, they were not necessarily bummed out about it, but they were just kind of like, it's unfortunate that we have to get the Clippers-Lakers in the Western Conference final because whoever wins that is likely going to win the championship. But now there's the unfortunate circumstances of COVID. I'm not saying it's a great thing, because it by all means is not a great thing. But the circumstances that present themselves here, they're able to do this where we could potentially have a Clippers-Lakers final. And I think that is absolutely fantastic.
I think it's great. It certainly would be great for the city of LA. I mean, that would be just a huge, huge party. I would equate that almost to, do you remember the Yankees-Mets World Series?
Yep.
And how New York was rocking because everybody was watching the two New York teams in the finals of the World Series, battling it out. I would argue that this would be equivalent to that, possibly even greater, all things considering how sports deprived we all are. The ratings will very likely be through the roof with that. But what I really like most about this, and I really hope that if indeed this happens, that they see the benefit in this reseeding format instead of Eastern Conference, Western Conference, and whatever, because this almost gives it a March Madness kind of feel.
Yep.
A March Madness kind of vibe. Like you could very well see a number 5 Celtics team go down to a number 12 76ers team. Like you could see that.
I was watching CBS Sports Network this morning over on Pluto TV, and they were talking the betting lines, all that stuff about this, and they were talking potential like Memphis could beat the Raptors. The Grizzlies could go over the Raptors just because how they match up and how they play the game.
And just think awesome about it being that, being there, it would be a true legitimate upset.
Although I'll tell you what though, you mentioned March Madness. I see the numbers next to the name and I'm like, bro, there's no way the 14's beating the 3, or there's no way the 16's beating the 1. Like I like acid flashback to March Madness. It's so funny.
I don't see the Magic beating the Bucks or whatever, but I do see or the Nets beating the Lakers. But I could see the Rockets upending the Jazz. I could see Memphis pulling one out on the Raptors. I could see the Sixers over the Celtics. I think the Thunder and the Heat would be a great series because they're evenly matched. This has the potential already as is to be, remembered forever, but could be remembered forever, not just as being the COVID plan, but being a damn good tournament with a lot of twists and turns.
I wonder, obviously, if this does become, if this is as successful as it could potentially be, I don't necessarily think that it would be feasible with the amount of travel. But honestly, I mean, even to get, I just hope they would do it. That's just my opinion. I just hope they would do it.
And even to that point, if they decide that that's the way that they could go, they could then sell the tournament, the NBA Madness tournament, if you will.
Well, because you remember too, they mentioned
in hub cities like the NCAA does.
They talked about doing a mid-season tournament. I wonder if this might push that forward.
It might. I don't know, but I don't disagree with this. And quite frankly, Adam Silver is probably at this point in time right now the most popular commissioner in sports.
I think he's the most progressive commissioner in sports as well. And that's what makes him so popular. I mean, it's a shame I don't like basketball as much as I like, say, hockey. But because the sport is really leaps and bounds ahead of all the other sports, in my opinion. Now, speaking of sports and not being progressive, and this will be our last topic of the podcast here. This can be our look ahead, if you will, because we're looking ahead to potentially no baseball. And you ask why that is. Well, Major League Baseball unleashed what we will call here on the Better Live Than Dead podcast, the fuck bitches get money plan. Why, you ask? Well, before, players were asked to take a pay cut, and players said, we'll prorate our salaries for the games we play. So if we play half a season, half my money. Simple enough, right? So the owners have proposed cutting players' salaries even more. It was originally reported by ESPN's Jeff Passan, so we'll give him the credit here. Quote, under this formula, Los Angeles Angels star Mike Trout, who at $37,666,666 has the highest full season salary in baseball this year and would make $19,065,843 over on a prorated basis over 82 games. He would now, after this new proposed pay cut, have a base salary of $5,748,577, though players would only be paid for games played. Trout could make upwards of $2.5 million more under the proposal if the league completes the World Series. So, John, I'm just going to go out there on the record and say, even though some national baseball writers have said that there is some sort of optimism that a deal will get done because they want to start July 4th. So their soft target was tomorrow or June 1st for those listening after June 1st. But they said June 5th, June 9th to June 9th could be like the next window that they're looking at. But John, in my expert podcasting and journalistic opinion, I'm going to go with we're probably not getting baseball this summer.
I don't believe we are. It sucks to see because, I'm a traditionalist and I love baseball. But they are very, very archaic with a lot of their practices and a lot of the things that they do. And I'm very much with you. I don't see baseball happening. I mean, it's bad enough that there's already disarray in the minor leagues with the realignment and all that shit that's going to be happening. And by 2021, farm systems are going to look radically different, including and including the one here in Rochester, which when I get the okay, I'll share that info. But,
I think, and not to mention, even in Batavia, I think we're losing the Muck Dogs. I'm fairly certain, that the Batavia Muck Dogs may have played their last game as an affiliate of the Florida Marlins.
Oh, yes, I believe if I'm a betting man, I would bet that the Muck Dogs are not going to be back unless they're an independent baseball organization or something like that. I don't see them being. They were. Rochester Community Baseball Incorporated was helping fund them. Yep. And I have a friend of mine, a very close, dear personal friend of mine, that's one of the shareholders of Rochester Community Baseball Organization. Every year he would go to the shareholders meeting and then he'd bring it to work, all the things to work. So that way I can look over and I mean, it was a money pit. It was a money pit for them. They were losing money every year on the Muck Dogs. And so, I mean, it's a nice experience. I regret never taking in a Muck Dogs game. I would have loved to just to see. But in a business like that, when you're already a minor league team that struggles to compete with keeping people in attendance, especially when people from your team, when they do really good, they're called up, and now you don't have them anymore. Mm-hmm. Batavia being single A, how many of those people are really going to be called up to the market?
Yeah, I mean they've had their fair share, but the amount of players that don't make it makes it difficult. I mean, with Rochester, At least they have the players where you can see them go up to Minnesota and play whatever, and it makes it a little easier. Kind of sells itself. But yeah, Batavia has struggled for a while. The New York Penn League, last time I remember reading, that they run the team, they finance the team, all that stuff. But going back to the original point here, I mean, with how things have gone in the minor leagues, with teams no longer paying players, with teams cutting players, the minor leagues are likely not going to happen this year. Just a presumption on that one. On top of that, I mean, players, we saw, the name is Blake Snell, the pitcher for the Tampa Bay Rays, talked about how he goes, I'll get paid X, but then after taxes, I make Y. And is it really worth it for me to put my long-term health at risk to play for pennies on the dollar? And while people say, play for the love of the game, don't play for the money, you got to think this guy also has a career and a life to think about that. Say, for instance, he plays this part-time season for, I don't know, a percentage of what he was supposed to make, and he blows his elbow out and never pitches again. He just gave up his livelihood for next to nothing because the owners are, end of the day, it's ownership being greedy. The teams are crying poor. Yes, the teams are going to lose money, but the teams are going to lose a lot more money if they don't have baseball. So I guess I don't really see the point of squeezing players for every last dollar. Right.
And to your point there about, anyone, inferencing or referencing play for the love of the game, not for the money. Yeah, the love of the game is fine, but if I wanted to play for the love of the game, I'd join a recreational softball league. I'd still be on a baseball field. I'd still be doing that. I want the money. You know what I mean?
You're good enough. You're good enough to be one of the best in the world at what you do. Right. You deserve to be paid, and not to mention, not even beginning to mention again, the players already agreed to a pay cut. If you wanted to squeeze them then.
Right, exactly, and equating it, because wrestling ties into everything. At least with me, I was a pro wrestler, but I was never on the level of a Brody Lee or a Colin Delaney, or hell, even an Eric Eminon. I openly admit I wasn't even on the level that your brother got to towards the end of his career, but I was good enough to where, in an era in which, in an era when I was wrestling around locally, where, wrestling for the love of wrestling or just to be wrestling was the cool thing to do amongst that crowd, I was always the smarter one to say, yeah, I'm good. I can do this. I can do this if you want, but I'm not going to do it for the love of wrestling. I don't love wrestling that much. I love money. You want me to, take a steel chair to the head, which I never really did, but, you want me to wrestle in this specialty kind of match, it's going to cost you this amount of money to do it, because I need some sort of compensation for what is going to happen to me as I approach 40 and beyond, when cold weather hits and my shoulder doesn't feel right because I had to have surgery on it, or my ankle blows out and I can't walk on it for a couple of days because of, tweaking it, doing something stupid, jumping off the top rope for, 20 years, so yeah, the whole for the love of the game bullshit. No, and players are not wrong for thinking of themselves and their financial well-being. Now, that's under this situation. If we were to go back to football and talk about the Dak Prescott situation, that's a little ridiculous. But we're talking about baseball, and I don't disagree that, why should anybody risk their financial well-being just for the simple sake of getting games out there in a season that's already, crazy, and already not going. I mean, this baseball season typically starts the last week of March. We're two, and by that point in time, when they start to roll, if they were ready to roll in July, we would have been 3.5 months off of the season beginning. At that point, what is it really worth? Especially when you have the NFL saying we're going to proceed as normal, and also with the NBA, because that's another thing too, is with Major League Baseball during the summertime, they don't have competition. The NBA season wraps up. And hockey season wraps up in June. The playoffs and the Stanley Cup Finals wrap up in June, so they have essentially from midway June all the way through. I mean, if you want to include preseason football in August, people don't really. They're happy that week one of the preseason's there, but nobody's really paying much mind to the NFL during the preseason. But you essentially have from the end of June through the end of August as Major League Baseball exclusive. Now you're talking about shortchanging your Major League Baseball players and then putting them on a stage when you have the NHL considering starting the season again or starting the playoffs again. And playoff hockey, there's nothing like that experience ever. You've got the NBA with a very forward-moving and very, very intriguing idea that lots of people are going to pay attention to. And then you've got the NFL. It's going to start, according to them, business as usual, which is already a super big business, and it's going to take viewers away from, pretty much everything else. Like, is it really worth it, baseball?
I'm just sorry. I'm reading something over here on my end. I think John Jones may have just relinquished his light heavyweight title on Twitter.
On Twitter, well, I know he posted something about Dana White being a liar, and he asked for his release.
He said to Dana White, all that stuff. Yep, blah blah blah. And then let's see here. 34 minutes ago, Reyes first, Jan, which I believe his last name is Blachowicz. I don't know I'm bad with fucking names. You guys know that. For the light heavyweight title of the world, as of right now, I got nothing to gain fighting either of them. Let me know if you guys want to set up a payday in 2021 for that Izzy fight, which he wants to fight. Who is it that he wants to fight? I thought he wanted to fight Francis Ngannou, but he might be looking somewhere. He might move to middleweight and fight Israel. I can't say this. I gotta get better with names, man. I gotta get like a book or something. Either way, John Jones, they said, you revoking your title? He said, yes. To the light heavyweight title, I saw, I conquered. And then someone said, you're hurting yourself more than you're hurting the UFC. He said, I hurt myself every time I walk out there and take a punch to the head and not feel my pay is worth it anymore. So good on John Jones for standing up to that.
Good for him.
He deserves, speaking of getting paid, he deserves to get paid whatever. He has done so much to build that UFC brand. He shot himself in the foot a bunch of times being a straight up being a dipshit. But John Jones has done more for the sport than the sport has done for John Jones.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. And, honestly, there are two UFC pay-per-views, headliners are always appointment pay-per-views for me. And usually, I go in with Brandon on them, but it's whenever Jones fights and whenever McGregor fights.
Yeah, absolutely.
We always end up getting the fights and convening over at Brandon's house, and I'll bring the food or the beer or the whatever, and or throw him some change for the pay-per-view. And so I've seen every John Jones fight for the last 5 years, and every McGregor fight ever. And it's going to suck not having him, someone as great as him in the octagon, if indeed he's saying peace out, UFC.
I mean, I think the UFC will probably wisen up and pay him, but still,
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will, because it always works out that way. When the big stars always say, fuck you, I'm out. They always find a way to get back to one another. So
it's just a bad look for Dana White.
Oh yes.
You're making hand over fist and you can't pay your fighters. Okay, cool. But
yep.
I guess that's a good note to end the podcast on, because I have to pee real bad. We've been talking for well over an hour now.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. We appreciate you hanging out.
And 45 minutes of it was the entry.
I think we hit all the topics. We'll be back sometime soon. Hopefully Mr. Perez will be back. Get well soon, Lewis, for sure.
Yes. Get well soon, and get well enough to be able to have a cigar, because I haven't had a cigar since the beginning of COVID. And I'm dying to restore Cigar Mondays at Santiago. So
there you go.
Get better. Get the all clear to have a cigar, and then let's have a cigar, Lewis.
John is at IamJC Money. I am at Wolfe BLTD. We are better live than dead.
You're not.
And stay safe out there. The president's a racist, and I gotta pee so bad.
Black Lives Matter.
We'll catch you sometime soon. Thanks for tuning in.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the GERE Network.